It's the midweek podcast. We welcome you all in after a wild weekend of college baseball. Many top 10 teams being swept, some big statements being made all across the board. And Charlie Bornoff and myself, Will Connerly, here with you guys to talk about the crazy weekend of college baseball. We've got 4 regular season weekends left until the conference tournaments and then the NCAAs. Charlie, it's getting pretty wild, and I'm excited to talk about it all. A lot of shakeup this past week. One of the more exciting weeks that I've experienced in terms of consuming college baseball in a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we finally had some reshuffling in the top five this week, Will. Something that has not really happened in a long time.
Yes, that is true. And there were some massive series, some top 10 matchups that easily or at least suspectively had that top 10 shakeup, but also the fact, Charlie, that as I alluded to it, there was a lot of top 10 teams that just, I don't know if you call it laying duds more so or just getting swept left and right. Multiple SEC teams just brooms out. That was super interesting to me at this stage in the season. That's why you saw that shakeup, which we will get into. But first, should we start with our winners, losers, and weekend rotation?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. So speaking of a wild weekend, there was maybe not something more wild than what happened in Durham, North Carolina for Duke. I mean, Duke had a weekend. Right now, they find themselves in the ACC in the Coastal Division in first place with a 12-8 record, just a slightly better conference record than Virginia, who's 12-9. But they've gotten there. They've now ripped off 5 consecutive victories. And what they did over the weekend, well, it was pretty impressive, sweeping a team in Louisville who came into town, a top 15 team in the country. And they're able to get a walk-off grand slam night one, a walk-me-off night two on a single, and then night three they score 3 runs in the bottom of the 8th and win the game as well. So 3 1-run victories against Louisville. You're a winner for me because you've won back-to-back ACC series against top 15 teams in the country, and now people are starting to talk about Duke potentially being one of the top 16 teams come NCAA tournament time, and I'm all for it. They've been hot, obviously, and they've showed a lot of fight. Like, even go back to game one, they were down 7-0, and little do you know, you're down 9-6 headed to the ninth, and you're able to win. Really impressive, and it just shows the fight and the will of Duke. So I love to see it, and they're my first winner.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I think a big thing for Duke this year has been, the emergence of that freshman class from a year ago that you and I are really high on, especially that's highlighted by Alex Mooney, who was the best player in that class. I mean, dude's balling out this year, had a big weekend himself. Duke's looking really good. They're definitely in a great position to make the tournament. I mean, as long as they don't absolutely fall off the face of the earth, I'd be very surprised that we don't see them, playing in the postseason here. Just kind of goes to show you how good the ACC has been this week. Definitely did not think they'd sweep Louisville. Louisville's better than getting swept by a team like Duke, but at the end of the day, this kind of shows you the power of the ACC is that, hey, no matter it, kind of the SEC too, because we're gonna talk about that as well, is doesn't matter how good you are, even the quote unquote traditional non-powers are just as good and can take you every weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Duke is really impressive, and they've gotten notoriety since then. I mean, you can't ignore it, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested. They take on the ninth ranked team of the country here today in Campbell.
Oh yeah.
How about some midweek matchups in the Carolinas, like Coastal
So
Carolina
many.
and Wake today? That's a top 10 battle. And then Campbell and Duke, a top 25 battle as well. Campbell up to number 9. I'd love that midweek Tuesday madness. But Charlie, I mean, you got back-to-back series wins against top 15 teams, like, I don't, and you're first in your respective division in the ACC right now. You look at it in the D1 baseball poll, they're ranked now, and they're tabbed number 16 by Baseball America. I think they've got to be a team right now. They're 20th by D1 Baseball that you think would post. I mean, I know they're on the outside looking in at 20th right now. You got to be top 16, but I think that they'll end up getting there. Obviously, they have a big weekend on the horizon, but if they win this weekend, they certainly are putting themselves strong in that position. 27-12 overall. They've won 5 in a row. They're 20-8 at home, and I would love to see them play some more home games in the postseason because they've been playing so well down the stretch.
That's a great point. I would agree with you too. I mean, especially after this weekend, that they win the series or sweep even. I mean, they probably since they're playing who they're playing again. They're playing Virginia. I mean, assuming even if Miami wins their series, I could see them jumping over Miami at that point, being comfortably in a potential hosting spot. Because I mean, looking at the teams, I mean, the guys that they're kind of neck and neck with the host right now that would be currently hosting the season ended today, just going to the top 16. I mean, Miami, Kentucky, Texas Tech, Virginia are a bunch of teams that they could easily take over for that.
Well, that's the nice thing, too. 2 of those 4 teams they play. When you
Yeah.
look at Duke's schedule, they got Virginia this weekend, and then they'll have a Georgia Tech weekend, and then Miami, and then they have one non-conference weekend when they play Longwood. But Miami to finish the year. So they're going to still play Virginia, still play Miami. So a lot still to happen, but they're definitely my first winner. You get 3 one-run victories. It just shows the drama, which I love in the game of baseball, exciting. Like you're down 3, you hit a walk-off grand slam. You got to give Mooney some credit for
Yeah.
being clutch in that position. But I mean, that's just freaking awesome too. Like to be able to hit a walk-off grand slam down 3. I don't think there's any moment as a fan of a team that you could get more hyped for. Maybe a perfect game. I'm probably more hyped for a walk-off grand slam even than that. Like that's the peak of hypeness in the game of baseball, in my opinion, especially when you're at home playing a ranked team. So enough said about my first winner. Let's move on to you, Charlie.
We're going to stay in the ACC. We're going with a team that's not as talented as the Duke Blue Devils, but had just as impressive, equally not, if not even more impressive, upset series sweep. Will talking about the sweeps this weekend over Virginia this weekend. They didn't win big besides game 2, but I mean, when you hold the Virginia lineup to 13 runs on the weekend, I mean, that's a big time W right there. Notre Dame desperately needed that series win. They're 23-15 overall, which isn't too bad when you really think about it. But they're now sitting on a 5-game win streak going into the next weekend where they're facing Florida State, which is a very winnable series. And you know Notre Dame's
Mm-hmm.
going to want that too, especially with the new skipper at FSU, Link Jarrett, formerly coming from Notre Dame and taking Notre Dame to Omaha a year ago.
Yeah, that's the storyline right there for that series coming up. But for Virginia getting swept, I mean, have they kind of been a letdown? They started the year ripping off what 20 wins in a row.
Yeah.
Now they've lost 3 straight after getting swept, but overall they're 12-9 in conference play. They're 32-9 overall. So they didn't lose a non-conference game.
Yeah.
They get into ACC play and they're 12-9 in conference play. Are you concerned about Virginia? That's my question right now, because you look at, they've done some impressive things in conference play. They have a winning record, but like, okay, they sweep Miami, impressive for sure. But then you have the Pitt series that they lose, and now they lose to Notre Dame. Man, that's definitely an interesting thing for Virginia, and it doesn't get easier, although they do get to host Duke here this week. So, man, we talk about 2 series involving the 2 teams that play each other next week in Virginia and Duke. And I know you talk about it more on the positive side, but I'm almost bringing it negative. I'm like, Virginia was supposed to be this Omaha contender, and Notre Dame comes up with a big time win.
Yeah, so I'm not too worried. I mean, any season with any team, I don't care really care how good you are for the most part, but there's peaks and valleys, right? With
Mm-hmm.
every season. I think Virginia's in their deepest valley right now. I think it's just a bad stretch. I think they're too talented to not continue to be really good and still even fight for an Omaha spot. Maybe might look a little less, might look a little more dim right now. But I mean, they're still leading the ACC in batting average this year by a comfortable lead. They're hitting 334 on the year. Georgia Tech's second place at 317, and Virginia is also still top 3 in ERA for that conference. I mean, they've got a ton of talent. I mean, we have guys like Kyle Teal and Griffin O'Farrell. I mean, those guys are really going to carry a team. They're going to get you a lot of wins. I think Edgington's been really good for them as a starter this year, a guy that's been under talked about of arms. So I try to get him some love. I don't want to call it fluky because the other two teams, like Notre Dame's a decent squad. Pitt's been playing better as of late, but I do think this is more of Virginia losing than truly getting beat at times. Because like I said in my little thing, like they didn't really get blown out, and especially in college baseball, there's quite a lot of randomness in college baseball compared to
Mm-hmm.
the professional ranks. So it's more likely for these kind of series to get away from you. It's getting late in the season. Maybe some guys are a little tired, maybe a little banged up, but overall, I think Virginia's going to bounce back. I'm not too worried about them overall.
Yeah,
It does hurt their chance though. They really have to win out and continue to dominate the ACC the whole way and win the tournament probably if they want to get into that top 8 to host a super regional.
right. And I think that if they do host a super regional, they'll have a really good chance to get to Omaha. It's hard to beat
Yeah,
Virginia at home. They're 23
absolutely.
and 2 at home. And like the position player group is so good. Jake Geloff, Kyle Teal, like you talk about names like that, it just is kind of scary when you're hitting 334
Yeah,
as a team, as you've detailed. But yeah, man, I think that for Notre Dame, like they've got to get some credit. Like
yeah,
I because there were so many sweeps over the weekend, Charlie, and I'm glad you picked this as a winner because this wasn't the first one that came to mind, but like for real, like that's so big for Notre Dame. So
yeah,
I'm happy about that in that respect. Like, okay, good for you guys because that really helped their chances of getting into Omaha and Virginia. I think that they just struggle to have consistency on the mound. But like we said, it's a game of baseball. They're going to have their peeps, they're going to have their valleys, and they're still in a pretty good position. My next winner is going to be a team that was probably the best team in college baseball the season ago, and it feels like they found their mojo once again. That's Tennessee. They came down. They were down going into the ninth inning on Friday, Charlie,
yes,
and
sir.
they're able to launch a couple of long balls, host or force some extra innings. They get Chase Burns out there throwing 100, take game one, and that ignited a fire that let them explode for 27 runs the next two games. And I think that a switch has been flipped for this Tennessee team. Now, they're not as good as they were last year, and I don't think they even have the potential to be that good in terms of a ceiling, but they don't need to be to get to Omaha because that team last year was a letdown not getting there. However, when you look at this team, you look at the pitching staff that it can be so impressive, and the new role for Burns out of the bullpen, pretty impressive
Oh
to be
yeah.
able to come in and throw that much fire. But it felt like, especially when you're playing in Knoxville, they looked like the Tennessee of 2022. That's what I saw a lot of people talking about. You could feel that energy. And that was such a it felt like that was a turning point in Tennessee season. They kind of flipped the switch at this time. And just so you know, Ole Miss was 5-10 at one point in SEC play, and then followed up with a big victory. That's what Tennessee just did. They were 5-10. They rip off a series sweep against a really good Vanderbilt team, and they got to be feeling pretty good about themselves now. So they're my second winner, the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, I like that winner. I think you brought up a good point. This is definitely not the team from a season ago. Still have plenty of talent. I just don't think, a lot of guys this is their first year really starting for a lot of them because they're so backed up last year. So I think maybe next year might be a better option for them in some ways. But I do agree with the fact that one, Chase Burns looked good out of the pen, which also hats off to him. It's kind of a tough thing to do when you're one of the top pitchers on one of the top pitching staffs, and you kind of get more air quotes like relegated a little bit, to the bullpen when you're a guy with that kind of talent with expectations you have going into the season. But I mean, hats off to Chase Burns for being a team player and performing well in his role. A thing too that's just like this team doesn't have as much pop. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now. Only two guys have over 10 home runs with Blake Burke and then Griffin Merritt do as well. They still have plenty of talent. Like Jared Dickey's still a stud. Denton Maui Ahuna, Christian Moore is one of my favorite at bats to watch each week. He's always competitive, takes really good counts. But glad Tennessee got this back, Will, and I like how you kind of compared them to Ole Miss last year. I don't think they have as much top end talent as Ole Miss did last year. Um, but it's the fact that this team is still really talented and they'll make the tournament. And I mean, once the tournament happens, you really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, They showed this weekend. Everyone should know. I mean, if the pitching staff's right and the team is right, they can beat anybody.
Yeah, really impressive, and they kind of, it just feels like they had that have that mojo back. Like they do have some good talent, and yeah, that's I'm intrigued to see what they can do moving forward because it felt like this was kind of a dangerous series for Vanderbilt in the fact that the ball flies out at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt really relies on their pitching. Like Vanderbilt has won some series this year when the wind has been blowing in. Like that favors Vanderbilt just because they're not as explosive as an offense compared to what they can do on the mound. But it was a tough series for sure in Tennessee. They didn't just stop after the crazy Friday night. They really took it to them the next two games. So how about you, second winner, Charlie?
We're gonna go to the AAC. I'm not talking about ECU, Will. Talking about the guys that shocked them. Wichita State. They're now on a 6 game win streak with series wins over Tulane, and then obviously this massive series sweep against East Carolina. They're now 24-15 on the season, Will. But what's really impressive to me when you look at the numbers of this series is the fact that they held ECU to 3 runs on the whole weekend. And not even that, there's 2 shutouts in that because it's only on game 2 when ECU put all 3 runs across the board. And now Wichita State, well, if you look at the conference standings, they're tied with Houston at 8-4 in the conference. They have a better regular just conference record, or not conference, better record overall than Wichita State. And if you look at their remaining schedule, okay, they play Houston, they have Memphis, oh my God, they have Memphis first, then they play Houston, so then they have South Florida, then UCF. All of those are very winnable series for them, and a lot of very much control your own destiny. So if they win out series wise, I mean, you're looking at the ACC regular season champs right there.
Yeah, I mean the American Athletic Conference, the standings right now,
Really close.
Wichita State in first, Houston also tied for first. So Wichita State and Houston each have an 8-4 record, which is atop the AAC standings. So Wichita State, Houston, you say those two are getting ready to play?
Two Houston is 2 weeks from now. I misspoke. It goes Memphis, Houston, South Florida, then UCF after that.
Okay, so when you look at the,
It's very
the
winnable.
complexion of the conference, yeah, very winnable, but that would into not this weekend, but next weekend when Wichita State travels to Houston, it feels to me like that could decide who's going to win the conference.
Could.
ECU's still going to have something, but we're definitely going to have that as a series pick on
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
podcast next week. Wichita State at Houston, the two teams tied for first right now in the American. I love that
And
winner. Wichita State, man. Like,
they're good.
I bring the same question to you as I did with Virginia. Like, is this more concerning that ECU did this, or does this tell us that, hey, Wichita State can actually play a little bit and we shouldn't just be talking about an ECU team from this conference?
I'd say it says more about Wichita State than ECU. You can definitely make the pitch. There's a little to ECU. I mean, when you get shut out in 2 games and only played 3 across the whole weekend, that's just not a good look, no matter what kind of team you are, no matter how talented you are. But I mean, Wichita State has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys hitting over 300, and one of those guys is also, I'll talk about him later because he's on my weekend rotation, but I'm not. I'll keep his name hidden for now. But one of their guys is a 2-way and arguably their best pitcher as well, and their best pitcher or second best pitcher really has a sub 4 ERA and is also hitting 321 at the plate. So that's always a
Yeah.
good play right there.
No, Wichita State can really swing it.
They got some dogs, man.
And so can Houston.
Yes.
You look at Wichita State's batting average in, so I like looking at this at least at this point in the season. I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at stats, right? At the beginning of the year, Virginia, they usually score like 40 runs in their first weekend, like in a game against a team that,
Yeah.
isn't in
Has
their
no business
conference.
being there.
So sometimes I'll look at conference only statistics. I think they all matter in one way or another. But when you look at the conference only statistics in the American, Wichita State leading the way, hitting above 300 as a team in
Yeah.
conference play. So not to mention what they did on the mound. They're second in ERA, first in batting, and they're trying to make a claim to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league. I love that winner because really Wichita State feels like a team that should be good at baseball. You get a lot of hard throwers from the Midwest that keep the ball down and break off breaking balls with farmer strength to take fastballs the other way. I mean, I'm thinking the Shockers, and they've had good program and team in the past.
Alec
So
Baum.
yeah, exactly. It's you see what he can do in the postseason.
Oh yeah.
So, man, I love it. And I love how you can just rip random schools. I wouldn't say which to say random, it's a very good program, but just rip off alumni like that.
Oh
That's
yeah.
my favorite part. One of my favorite parts of many about all your wide array of a skill set right there.
I
Just
try. I try.
off the rip. So that's big time. As we continue, how about this team, Charlie?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if anybody had a more impressive weekend than maybe the team that you're about to talk about. But first, my third winner, it's Georgia. Georgia, the last couple years, me and you, I mean, we've been high on them. Like
Yeah.
they had a good last 2 years.
Oh
They
yeah.
start SEC play, what, 1-7? They are terrible to start SEC play. And then last week they started to turn some heads. And then this weekend, they get the brooms out. They get the
Yes, sir.
brooms out against the fifth ranked team of the country in Arkansas. The Bulldogs, honestly, Georgia and Tennessee are very similar to me. Good amount of talent. They've got pros on their team, and they're kind of finding their stride. How big was this series win for Georgia?
Yeah, it was massive. I mean, you sweep any team in the SEC, let alone number 5 Arkansas. You're gonna hang your hat on that for sure. People forget Georgia's not only a football school, got a great baseball tradition. Will, like you said last year, everyone knows I was a huge Jonathan Cannon guy. But this year, Will, I'm a huge Charlie Condon guy. Not because he has the same name as you, but that does help. I mean, when you're a freshman, you come in rolling, hitting 422 with an OPS of a 1.368 and 18 homers, and you got a month left in the season still. And that's going to turn a lot of heads, and that's the kind of thing that you look for to hang your head on because him and Connor Tate make a nasty duo.
Yeah, they do. And they've shuffled them around in the lineup. I was watching an interview of Scott Strickland, and he was talking about some of the construction of what they want to do. But you're right, your boy Charlie. I mean, if it weren't for Ethan Petrie being the National Freshman of the Year, it would be a lock. Condon's having one of
Absolutely.
the best seasons a freshman has ever had in the SEC,
And
along with
quietly, I feel
Petrie.
like,
Yeah, he's been really good because it's on Georgia and they've had a slow start, but people should
yeah.
talk about him now. And then you've got to talk about Connor Tate. I'm going to talk about him a lot here in a little bit. But yeah, you talk about Georgia. If we just, roll through this at least, okay, we look at the Arkansas sweep. That's great. That's one weekend, sure. But what about just a couple of weeks ago? They were also able to take a series against Kentucky. So, like, Georgia's
Yeah.
starting to find their stride right now. So, I think that this is going to be, they're trending in the right direction. And that's why I'm picking them as a winner right now for me. How about we go to you now? As one top 5 team went down in Arkansas, but I know you're about to talk about something else, Charlie.
Yes, sir, baby. The South Carolina Gamecocks with an absolute massive statement series sweep over the Florida Gators. We got Will Sanders. Will, you know him. We all love him. We know him. We love him again. Will Sanders absolutely shoved in game 1, absolutely dominant. Probably the best start of his year, in my opinion. Especially, too, on that Friday. And when you run rule the Florida Gators, it's not so much the impressive part that you held the Gators at bay, but the fact that you can hit with them in games like that is absolutely impressive. Massive W there. We just talked about Ethan Petrie, the best freshman in the country, in my opinion. Gavin Costas rakes. Noah Hall's one of the more underrated arms in the league, in my opinion. This team is just fucking different. I'm going to tell you why they're different, Will, for a couple of reasons. They're now in sole possession of first place in the SEC with a 13-4 conference record, 34-6 overall on the year, 24-1 at home. So when they get that top 8 bid seed, it's going to be a fucking hell of a time for you to play the South Carolina Gamecocks. They have about one of the easiest roads getting into Omaha, in my opinion, on the year. Talk about some of these guys. Still Petrie hitting 427. We said Charlie Condon hitting 422. Well, sorry, Charlie. Ethan Petrie's doing a little bit better, baby. So you better bust out that StarKist to get the protein going because the man's got 20 home runs as well and an 895 slugging percentage. And to mention those starting pitchers, dude, Will Sanders, we just said shoved out the best game this year, probably the best pro prospect on this team right now in the pitching staff. He has the worst ERA that starts at a 4.76, but that thing's been tumbling down because gravity's been taking a toll. But Jack Mahoney, Noah Hall, both sub 3.3 ERAs on the year. And then Will, forget about the individuals. It's a team sport. You need a team to win. That's why Mike Trout hasn't won shit in the postseason. It's not his fault. It's the Angels' fault. But there's nobody to fault in the South Carolina Gamecocks. National ranking, second in homers per game with 2.3, fifth in scoring in the nation with a 9.4 runs per game, second in ERA with a 3.23, sixth in slugging, sixth in on base percentage, fifth in the nation in strike to walk ratio. That's his batters. And then the last one will round out third in whip with a 1.18 whip on the year. I mean, all these numbers are huge. I mean, I understand why LSU is still the number one ranked team. You haven't lost on a weekend. I do think South Carolina was going to beat them in that weekend if the weather had held up. And I know that there's still Vanderbilt, and South Carolina's lost Vanderbilt, but I don't think there's a more well-rounded, more balanced team in the country than South Carolina this year. And I think that people have slept on too is health has been huge for them.
Well, what I was gonna say too is like I was so impressed with South Carolina because I think about it like this, and I'm not as animated as you even, but I can get there. They're damn impressive. They didn't just beat Florida. They beat
Crushed
the
them.
hell out of Florida, like easily. And the scary thing for this team is think about it. Is there going to be a better team that comes to South Carolina's barn the rest of the year? I don't think so. Like they're 24-1 at home. And I'm saying, is there going to be a better team than Florida? Like when you look at it, because I'm trying to think about it like this, Charlie, they're going to host a regional guarantee. They're going to be a top 8 national seed. So they're going to host a regional and they're going to host a super regional. But even in a super regional, I don't think that they're going to play a team at home. Let's say they get there, which we both believe that this is a team destined for Omaha. I don't think there's going to be a team better than Florida coming to Columbia. Look at the teams coming to Columbia on the schedule right now. Auburn, not better. When you look at it, North Florida in a midweek, definitely not better than Florida. And then Charlotte and then Tennessee. So you look at, and then they go down to Hoover and then they'll come back to Columbia and host some NCAAs. But there's not going to be a team better than Florida. And look what they did to Florida. So I have every reason to believe this team's going to Omaha. You mentioned health, and I say yes, but that's why I'm more impressed. I thought Florida was going to at least get a game because Noah Hall hasn't thrown in 3 weeks. And they still have the ability to throw in the young lefty in the rotation. He shoves. Will Sanders has the best start that he's had this year. And it's just real. I mean, you win 13-3. That just set the tone. Then a 5-2 win, then a 7-5 win. But the 13-3 win and the performance that Will Sanders had, so good. And then the ability for Petrie to just hit the ball out of the park. Oh my gosh. It's just, and he does it early. He does it against big time arms too. Like, this isn't.
If the season stopped today, I'm picking South Carolina as my national champions.
Hey, that's fair. And you've got your ace back. Like 10 strikeouts for Will Sanders in 6 innings. It doesn't matter. Like, I think everybody knows I watched every pitch of this game. His curveball looked amazing. And it hasn't looked as good this year as maybe people expected. The fastball's got a ton of swing and miss on it, and he was getting a ton of swing and miss against. Like I'm saying, they're not going to play a team better than Florida at home, so they're going to host a regional and win, host a super regional and win, and then go to Omaha. And I think they're going to meet up with LSU at Omaha, and that's going to be a banger because they didn't get to play that. They didn't get to play that third game. But you're right, and I wonder if Noah Hall gets back. I'm with you. I think that this team is Omaha bound because he hasn't thrown in 3 weeks. They say he's dealing with a back issue, and I thought at the beginning of the year he was the best pitcher on their staff. And so
his back hurts because he was carrying the staff.
Yeah, so and it's I didn't think Sproat threw the ball bad. Honestly, he looked pretty good to me, but it's just South Carolina didn't stop hitting. It was really impressive. That, and I think game 1 just was like it set the tone. It really did.
Yeah, it did. And it's the fact that Florida has more talented arms top to bottom, but not nearly as consistent.
Florida's pitching is a concern for me, honestly.
Yeah.
They're going to host a regional and be a top 8 seed, and they're really good. But South Carolina deserves all the credit in the world for what they did. Now,
Absolutely.
and for what people want to say they were without their closer, which was complete BS, it wouldn't have made a difference. I mean, maybe in game one it was 13-3. He probably was.
Yeah,
It
that
was
didn't.
close. Well, it was close for a while until South Carolina freaking exploded. But I don't think Brandon Neely would have won them a game this weekend.
No, I would agree with that.
Like I don't know. We don't know. I don't know if they would have. Yeah, but no, I love that winner. South Carolina, huge also for you because you picked them. And that's big time. It really is. So
Absolutely.
let's move on to some people that not.
Wait, honorable mention winner too is Campbell, first time in the top 10.
Yeah, that's how
And
about that?
Coastal back in the top. Shout out to the small schools in the top 10. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, they're not small on the field. I'll tell you that
Damn
right now.
right.
Coastal and Campbell are Omaha contenders. They're
For
national
real.
seed contenders. And Coastal, what? They're up to sixth? No,
Yeah, no, you're right. Coastal's at
sixth.
6, Campbell's at 9, and UConn's at 10. No one's talking about UConn, including us.
Hey, Robert Fry talked about him. I think he picked him,
Robert
right?
does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Rob. Yeah, no one picked Coastal though in ours. That's unfortunate.
dude, that's ouch because
That's like our Texas State from a year ago. Like no one picking Texas State.
right, because Coastal's the best mid major in the country right now. Like you can't say Campbell because they beat Campbell, but
True.
like Campbell's right there with them, and that's a crazy thing. I'm taking Coastal and Campbell over a ton of teams, and so is D1 baseball, the best
Yeah.
coverage of the sport. So as you see in their rankings,
Besides us.
so yeah, there you go. And UConn as well. So there's some Omaha contenders for sure. I cannot wait to see that. Dude, especially if Campbell gets a top 8, there is, and they got blessed a little bit because a bunch of teams in the top 10 lost this week, so they moved Campbell up because Campbell had a 4-0
Yeah.
week. Dude, if Campbell keeps winning, bro, and gets a top 8, like they're
They
going to
have to
Omaha.
host.
Well, they're going to, if they get a top 8, they're going to Omaha. You
Yeah,
think they're
probably
going
not.
to lose in the creek? You think they're going
No
to,
shot.
hell no. They're winning a super regional at home. I think so.
Is
I
this the
think so.
best year to be a Camels fan? Your team is on a record pace right now, so no one can beat you. Zach Neto's starting to crush it in the majors now. Cedric Molds is an all-star and a known commodity now for the pretty fun Orioles team. I mean, there's a lot going in the right direction for Campbell.
Dude, I agree. It's a great time.
If
It
they
is,
if they host if they host to Supers, we got to go to that. We got to find a way to get there.
dude, if they host supers, like you aren't beating them. I don't know who would beat
No.
them. Like
Yeah. Have
honestly,
fun facing Cade Keeler.
if you pick any team, like obviously they'd be teams outside the top 8, but pick any team, I don't know. All right, but that's enough about that we don't know what's going to happen. So let's now move along to some losers, some teams who disappointed over the weekend. I'll start, Charlie, and I'll just say one word: Texas. They they struggled over the weekend, Charlie. Oklahoma got the brooms out against them, and what a difference a dang week can make. I mean, we were. I mean, I don't know if I could say we, but I was loving and adoring some of the things that this Longhorns team had the ability to do in different ways. They struggled
Yeah.
this weekend, and all you can say is they look to, like, when a team struggles like that, especially losing to Oklahoma, like all you can say is they're looking to bounce back because I don't they were bad. They were really bad. I don't know. Do you have any initial comments before I rip into it a little bit more?
Just run in the middle of the fact that, yeah, it's a tough look when you lose to your biggest rival like that. Now also that brings Oklahoma to within a game of Texas in the Big 12 record standings right now. And it's looking at the Big 12 too. I mean, we said this before last week, the fact that none of these teams really like, oh my God, this is at Omaha. You can see the vision of them making it to Omaha and, playing real well. Maybe West Virginia at this point because they're a game away from 30 wins already and then pretty good. They're on a 3-game win streak. But I mean, like, there's got a ton of teams with 20 plus wins. I mean, Kansas is 2 games away from being 500. So Baylor would be the only like pretty dog shit team left out there. But I mean, I'm
Dude,
not too
TC.
surprised by this, just simply because I mean, nothing's been consistent about the Big 12 this year. Besides, I guess,
Dude.
West Virginia.
Well, yeah, West Virginia's. 29-11, like you mentioned. They're there for first place. Dude, all of a sudden, Oklahoma is only a game under 500.
Yeah.
We weren't even thinking about Oklahoma. Oklahoma's literally, you think about it, West Virginia's in first at 8-4, and then you go all the way down to Oklahoma, who's 7-8. So in the win column, they're only one game behind the team that's in first, and they're in sixth, and then TCU 7. But like, dude, it's just bad look for Texas. Now they're 8-7, Oklahoma 7-8. So they nearly jumped them in the standings by sweeping them at home. Like
Yeah.
Texas, you just can't do that. Like, I just think that's rough. Like you took 2 or 3 from Baylor, you won versus Kansas State, but I was high on them after they swept Texas Tech at home, but they can't even win a game at home against Oklahoma. I chalk it up as a loss. They do have some good things going for them in terms of some individual talent. Porter Brown's putting together a great season offensively, and Lucas Gordon on the hill is legit. He can win a lot of game ones for you, but man, tough sequence for the Longhorns. Really, really tough. They hurt their causes in many ways, but in terms of the Big 12, when we're talking about hosting, no team from the Big 12 is going to host. They've been bad this year at the top.
Yeah.
So let's move along, and we'll hear what you have to say about your first loser.
My losers this week are pretty boring, but that's okay. Um, Losing's not fun, obviously. But my first loser is Arkansas. You get swept by Georgia. Hats off to Georgia. They've earned it. They've got some real talent on that team. They were fairly close losses. So if you want to hang your hat on anything, not getting blown out's better than, getting blown out in some ways in terms of, I guess, rankings and stuff. Because Georgia absolutely dominated them. I'm sure Arkansas will be a little further down the polls than they are. But this is one of those things where we were just seeing the praise like, oh, we don't really talk about Arkansas. They just keep ripping off, SEC wins after SEC win. You're a way better team than Georgia is. You should not be losing to Georgia.
It shows you how hard it is to win on the road
Yes,
too
sir.
in the SEC. I mean, there was a pair of one-run games, like, but it is. I agree. It's a rough thing. I think it just proves, like, in the SEC, one can beat the bottom can beat one. Georgia was toward the bottom, and they're suddenly not anymore. And I just don't know. It just shows you, like, the Hogs struggled. Like, I was watching what was it, the Thursday game. It was kind of cool
Yeah.
because on Thursday, this series was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So this game and the Tennessee game were both Thursday. Arkansas freaking was 3 for 18 with runners in scoring position. Like, they had opportunity after opportunity. Like, they were just they stranded 11 guys, and they just struggled overall. And I agree with you. That might be the biggest yikes of the week. It's getting swept against Georgia. So
Yeah, it's a tough L, man.
it is. As we continue, I'm going to be briefer on this one because we already talked about it. On the other side of it being a winner for you in Wichita State, I had East Carolina, the team that Wichita State beat, as a loser in that regard, because they really hurt their chances of being a top 8. I think after they
Yeah.
felt like they were in position there, they dropped a little bit in the rankings and ultimately the standings too. You talk about wanting to win a regular season conference title. Well, it's Houston and Wichita State now first, as we detailed in the conference standings. So Wichita State, kudos to you, like we mentioned, but East Carolina's my second loser.
Yeah, that's a good one. Fair. It does make Cliff Godwin and coach that much harder to get to Omaha once again. But who's to say? You never. They were so close last year. Maybe this is the year. But we've been saying that. People have been saying that for now, like the past decade, almost. It feels like.
Yeah,
Speaking of catching L's, Louisville drops all 4 games in their week. It's a tough stretch, but I think it's one of those things where it doesn't hurt you in the RPI too much because, the sweep was again, you got swept by Duke, which you should, like, they're better than Duke, so you really shouldn't get swept by them, but they all were losses by 1 run. So it's kind of, those things can break either way, obviously. And then your midweek losses to Indiana, who we've talked about extensively the last couple of weeks about how good they are and how they could possibly win the Big Ten. So overall, not the worst thing, but I mean, four losses that you wish you had back.
absolutely. And as my first 2 losses, which I thought were pretty egregious. Texas getting swept by your rival East Carolina, just getting blown out in all three games. My third loser is Florida. So they're swept in three games at South Carolina. So you're on the road against one of the best teams in the country and you get swept, which okay, that's fine. You're on the road against one of the best teams in the country. But Florida's one of the best teams in the country as well. Having the Brooms get out against them, not a good look. And they hadn't lost back-to-back games this entire year. And then they lose three straight at South Carolina. And it's just that's what I'm saying. It's hard to critique, just like Arkansas. Like, okay, they lost three road games. It's hard to win on the road in the SEC. It's definitely hard as hell to win at South Carolina, a team that's only lost one home game all year. But the Gators just were not competitive on the mound at times.
No,
They walked the house. I mean, in two games in this series, they walked 9 guys. The other game, they walked 6. That's a whole hell lot of a walk. You're walking 20 plus guys in a series. It's hard to be competitive against that dangerous of a lineup in South Carolina. So I have some concerns. Their starters and their bullpen, I know they were without their closer, but that didn't, like, their starters and their pen both walked
yeah,
quite a bit of guys. And when you're issuing free passes
makes it
against,
that much
that's
harder.
your base runners on board for South Carolina. I do not want to pitch against South Carolina, much less the stretch. So that was a tough one. And it was the fourth and fifth time this season that Florida has walked 9 or more batters in a game. I mean, hell, they had a game versus Tennessee this year when they walked 18. So you get run ruled night one. It's just you're a loser for me. I mean, give Petrie his credit. He is a dog, and give South Carolina a lot of credit, but getting run ruled and just really the reason why I thought it was a loser is Florida never had a chance. Like South Carolina jumped on
No.
them every single game. So that's enough said. How about you for number 3 loser?
Well, I was going to say real quick too. I just think that that becomes concerning that the Arms really haven't figured it out as we get closer to the postseason. Obviously, when they're on, they can this Florida can beat anybody in the country pretty much, but because the offense is so incredible. But when you're doing that, it's a really tough look. And speaking of tough looks, this is my worst loser, biggest loser, I should say, of the weekend. It's Virginia. You get swept by Notre Dame. It's back-to-back bad series losses now to teams that just on. This comes down to the fact that, in my opinion, back-to-back series losses against teams just that Virginia has no business losing to. I still think of Virginia in a very high regard. I think they've one of the most talented offense in the league. They've got a solid pitching staff, and I mean, they just shouldn't be doing this. I think they're in, like we said earlier. I'm not gonna spend too much more time on because we talked kind of a lot about it already when we were talking about Notre Dame in the winner's side. But they're in their worst valley right now. I think they'll get out of it. But I mean, just sometimes you got to eat shit and move on.
Yeah, Virginia's. I'm concerned about their road record. They're only 8-7 on the road. So,
Yeah,
and they're not going to be playing at home in a super regional if they keep playing like this. So,
true.
that's a tough one, getting swept. So now we move on to our weekend rotation. My first guy again, run through it quickly. Well, it's Will Sanders, best start of the year.
As it should be.
He set the tone for South Carolina in that series. We talk about this series multiple times throughout this podcast because it was one of the biggest series in college baseball this year. You got 2 top 6 teams going at it, and Will Sanders ultimately he showed why he is a top prospect. Has a good fastball, high spin rate up in the zone. The breaking ball was nasty. Like he tripled up on breaking balls one time on Jack Caglione. Really impressive what he did, setting the tone. And so I'm going to give him my first in my weekend rotation. It's not maybe sometimes you see a guy goes 8 shutout. It wasn't maybe that, but it was enough to beat a Florida team, and he was impressive. So I give it to Will Sanders.
Yeah, great start. I was happy for Will Sanders as a very vocal Will Sanders stan and believer. It's great to see him do this, especially like what better time to do it than against the number 3 team in the nation, Florida. My first weekend rotation guy, though, a bat that I hand up myself have not been paying attention to. I don't usually focus on the BYU Cougars. I'm glad I'm giving my boy Austin Deming, though, some light this weekend because all he did, Will, was go 12 for 17 with 4 doubles, 4 home runs, and 15 RBIs with a 983 WOBA on the weekend. But on the year, one of the better bats and probably an All-American consideration for me. I'll have to look at other guys in his position and numbers at the end of the season, but got a healthy lead right now with a 436 batting average, 14 homers, and an OPS not too far from 1,500 and 50 RBIs on the year. The dude's absolutely raking this year. One of the best players on BYU, one of the best players in his conference, probably one of the best players in the nation that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, that's a weekend to only get out 5 times, 12 for 17
Yeah,
with 8 extra base hits, 8 of your 12 hits, extra bases. What a weekend he had. And it's not just this weekend, like you said. He has a 1,400 plus OPS on the year.
yeah,
That wasn't a typo.
no sir,
That's got to be leading every category in the country. I mean, that's amazing.
it
So he
is.
rakes. My second winner is Chase Burns. He came out of the bullpen throwing 100, and Tennessee was just really able to use that momentum to pick up a victory. I got to give it to him. He had some stones late in the game in a tight situation, and ultimately came out throwing fuzz, held Vanderbilt down, and allowed Tennessee to win it.
Yeah, it's a great pick. I'm not gonna spend too much time actually. How say it again? The hats off to Chase Burns for adapting to a role. It's kind of tough to do that sometimes, and I think people underrate that about how tough it can be to go from being a starter during the whole season to then having to all of a sudden go back into the bullpen and going forward with that. I mean, Chase Burns. I mean, if they keep him in the bullpen, I mean, that's gonna be an absolute weapon for them. So, my Saturday guy, we're going back to Wichita State because I kind of previewed that a little bit earlier. We're going with Peyton. I believe it's Toil or Tool. I apologize. I do not know how to pronounce it correctly. But I'm using he is the two-way I was talking about because he is, in fact, hitting. Where is he? I just lost 321 on the year with an OPS or a slugging percentage, say, of 519 with 8 homers. But Will, as a pitcher over the weekend, he had himself quite a day. 9 innings pitched, 2 hits, no runs, 10 Ks against ECU in that massive series win. On the year, on the pitching side, 3.62 ERA, a 1.04 whip, 66 strikeouts to only 13 walks on the year. And he's done that in 59 and two-thirds inning pitched. That's the kind of guy you want on your team. It kind of shows you what kind of firepower Wichita State has in the year. We're talking so highly about them, and deservedly so. They're one of the best teams in their conference. He's a big reason for that.
You're right, he is, and that's a damn impressive outing to be able to go the We talk about going the distance, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
You're not going to see many outings like that, especially against a team ranked as highly as ECU. 9 innings of the complete game shutout, not to mention 10 Ks. It doesn't get much better than that. So
Yes,
that is
sir.
awesome. Speaking of that, we've talked about it already. So again, we'll be brief, but he'll also earn a spot in my weekend rotation. And that's a young man by the name of Alex Mooney. Just a
Well,
sophomore, but a walk-off grand slam that puts me on the list, Charlie. Oh my God. I mean, I've already said everything I need to say about it. But the only other thing I'll say is, speaking of Grandies, how about Connor Tate, too, of Georgia? Back-to-back weeks that he has hit a game-tying grand slam in the ninth inning. No
jeez.
way that has ever been done before. Back-to-back week, you come up with just to come up with the bases loaded in back-to-back weeks in the ninth. And then also you're down by exactly 4 runs both times. I mean, game time grand slams for him, and then Mooney with the walk-off grand slam. I'm going to combine those Grandies into my Sunday guy for the Grandie.
That's a grand pick, Will. And yeah, that is wild. I mean, it's like, yeah, like you said, let alone just showing up with that kind of situation, but then to follow through on both. I mean, he must be cool because that dude's got straight ice in his veins, Will.
Yeah, he
Speaking
does.
of guys with ice in his veins over the weekend, though, we're taking it to the team old Ryan Keller drafted this year in our small school draft. We're going to San Diego State, Will, the home of legendary pitcher Steven Strasburg. We're talking about a different pitcher though today. TJ Fontaine, who's also two-way, but not nearly as good on the hitting side as our boy Peyton Toyle is. But TJ had a better pitching day, in my opinion. 9 innings pitched, no hits, Will. No hits at all. One walk and 14 Ks on the weekend. And then,
No, no.
yes, sir. And then on the weekend, he has a sub-3 ERA with a 2.92, a barely over a 1 whip with a 1.01, 69 strikeouts, nice, to 16 walks, over 61 and two-thirds inning pitch. Definitely been on the bright spots on what's been a rather, I would say, I guess, tumultuous season for San Diego State. They're 16-20, but they are 10-6 in conference. So, some ups and downs to the year.
Certainly. But man, that is an outing to say the least. And speaking of outings, we've got our series picks now. Some big outings coming up this weekend. And for this segment of the podcast, which is our final portion of the podcast where we make series picks, just a quick recap. Charlie, 30-13-2. Will, 26-17-2. So if you do the math and carry the one, Charlie's got a 4-game lead on me with 4 regular season weekends remaining. So if I make a game up per week, I could try to at least catch, potentially surpass Mr. Bornoff. But we have some big matchups this week. And should we get right to it? Should I tell us about the first one, or do you want to take the reins, Charlie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll do it first. Let's say, Will, you're 2 games away from surpassing your pick total of last year of 28. So much improved Will Connerly this season.
There we go. Love to hear that.
And speaking of much improved, we've got a great list once again for us today, folks. The first game we're going to talk about, Will, number 16 Miami at number 21 Louisville. I will be taking Louisville in this game, but as the fan, I want you to be objective, and I want people to know about the players. So the players are what makes this game worth watching. So players to watch, one from each team, like I did last week. I'll start doing it more. Player to watch, though, for Louisville, one of the best catchers in the nation. Would be the best catcher in the ACC most years if it wasn't for a little guy named Kyle Teal out there in Charlottesville. But in Louisville, we got Jack Payton on the year. He is hitting 386 with a 1,151 OPS, 8 homers, and he's got an ISO of 275. And on the Miami side, Will, one of the guys, my preseason picks for All-American, we'll see if he can stick with that for the rest of the season. But that is CJ Kayfus, arguably the second best bat behind Yo-Yo Morales on this team. We know what Yo-Yo's got, but hey, Yo-Yo, CJ Kayfus is pretty damn good himself. 315 batting average, a 973 OPS, 7 homers. He's got an ISO of 219. And he also will. The thing that's impressive to me, because you love to see, I know scouts of the see, especially at the college level, he has a 16.7% walk rate on the year. So you love seeing those guys that are patient at the plate. Be sure to watch Kafis for a really fun AB.
I love it. I think this series is intriguing from both teams' perspectives, right? You look at from if we start with Louisville, and I love how you brought up Peyton. He's having a great season, above 1,100 OPS, and he's really been swinging it well. For, let's be honest, a Louisville team that doesn't really rake. I mean, they can throw the ball very effectively, but they're toward the bottom in offensive statistics in this conference. But man, when I look at this, Louisville coming off of getting swept by Duke, that's just a gut punch when you get walked off twice. And then they have to come home and face Miami. I don't know.
Back to back, man.
I don't know. I'm gonna go and say it. Louisville will lose their third.
So you're going Miami.
Their third consecutive ACC series because they lost to Wake Forest. Then they lost to Duke getting swept, and I'm going to take Miami in this one. And for some of the reasons that you mentioned, now Miami cannot pitch as well as Louisville, but they are a better offense. And I think that the offense is going to prevail with the weather getting a little bit warmer now. I think that it's going to prevail. And although they have to travel from South Florida in Miami to Louisville, I do think that they're going to be able to prevail in this series, but I'm intrigued. It's a top 25 battle. Miami's ranked 16th. Louisville is 21st. And I like how you mentioned it's bold. It kind of is to pick Louisville to win their third straight or lose their third straight ACC series, and not to mention to do it at home. But that's just what I think Miami is going to do. Miami's been such an interesting team this year, but overall they're coming off a series win over Georgia Tech, and I think that they'll get the job done in Louisville, Kentucky this weekend.
That's fair. I simply just think it's the fact that I think Louisville's too good to lose 3 series in a row, but it should be a good matchup nonetheless. A lot of fun things to look for in that series. And speaking of fun things to look for, Will, we got the best team in the state of Kentucky facing off against the best team in Tennessee, and that is number 15 Kentucky Wildcats at number 5 Vanderbilt this weekend. Should be an absolute banger. Kentucky, one of the best surprises of the season so far. You could argue Vanderbilt's been a tiny bit of surprise just how dominant that pitching staff's been, especially now that the bats have woken up. And speaking of important bats for Vanderbilt, though, Will, the only transfer on this team that plays, or starts, I should say, in the batting order, RJ Schreck, a guy from Duke a year ago who we were high on. 366 batting average, a shade under a 1200 OPS, 10 homers. He's walking at a 16.6% clip, and he's got a 331 ISO on the year. So, I mean, dude's got a great bat, one of the biggest pickups in the transfer market, in my opinion. He's been paying off for them. But on the Kentucky side, Emilian Petrie or Pitre, I don't know how to say. I'm definitely butchering that, but it's okay because the man butchers baseballs. 376 batting average, a 1,020 OPS plus or OPS, one homer, walking just a shade under 20% of the time, and he's got a BABIP, which is batted balls in play. So anytime your batting average of the balls you put in play, he's got a 419 BABIP on the year.
That's impressive.
It is.
And Kentucky, it's just so tough to be able to.
I'm going Vanderbilt, by the way. I forgot to say
You're going
that.
Vanderbilt,
Yeah,
okay.
I just think they're the better team.
And then number 15, Kentucky at number 5, Vanderbilt. When I try to break this one down, I start to gravitate toward picking Vanderbilt at home. Just that's the analysis. That's simple. But when you break it down and go a little bit deeper into this, Kentucky is a really good team, and they've been good this year. And Vanderbilt is coming off a disappointing weekend. However, I just find it difficult to be able to pick this team in Kentucky over Vanderbilt, although I think that this series is going to be closer than some people are going to give credit for. I think it's going to be crucial in the series in terms of Vanderbilt wants to probably sweep so they can jump South Carolina in the SEC East standings. But I also think that it's going to be a grind. Kentucky also is probably going to have similar motivations overall, Charlie. But man, I'm struggling to make a pick here. I am struggling because I think that
gotta make one though, Willie.
I think that this is going to be a better series than people give credit for. Because you bring up, I think Vanderbilt's got better pitching, but Kentucky's had a tough go. Like they've had the last few weeks, they've been losing close games after they started the year with number 1 RPI, and they had to run into some of the best teams in the country. But I'll just go and say I'm gonna be picking Vanderbilt. I'll make it easy for you guys.
It's
all
fair.
right.
It's fair. Hey, chalk talks, that's what happens. Now we've got the best matchup by rankings. I would probably say the best match. Next one might be better, but you never know. It's to opinion. But we got number 17, Arizona State, at number 23, Oregon. Arizona is about to round out their Oregon gauntlet here. They beat Oregon State a weekend ago. I had chosen Oregon State in that series. I'm not going to make that mistake again with choosing the Oregon team. I'm taking Arizona State in this series. They've been just fantastic all year. Their bats have been really good, and one of the bats to highlight here is Luke Keeschel, 355 batting average with a 1,132 OPS, 10 homers, and a 329 ISO. Now, that doesn't mean Oregon's have dudes that can rake because Travis Bazana, 372 batting average. Will just a shade under 1,100 OPS, 4 homers, walks at. Will, I'm a slut for people that walk, man. I love dudes that can walk and take bases for free. And Travis does the best with some of the best because he has a 21.2 walk percentage on the year and a 214 ISO.
Okay. That comment you brought in about guys that walk. I hope if anyone's listening, you've got a fan. If you walk a lot. Man, this is another tough one, Charlie.
It's a tough one.
I'm not going to take as long. I was kind of just trying to talk myself one way or another, but just to recap, you've gone Louisville, Vandy, you've already picked, right? Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona State.
And then I went Miami, Vandy, and now
it's tough, man. Because it's tougher for you because you love yourself some Oregon Duck baseball.
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to pick Oregon at home.
There I am.
It's tough. Arizona State's, I think, a better team.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take Oregon at home for a couple of reasons. Arizona State, I think their hot start in conference play, you can't call it a hot start anymore. they've been good. We've had 4 weeks left. But Oregon is a solid squad, and I think this might be the best series of the weekend. I'm going to go Oregon at home. just for the simple fact that I need to make some games up on
I knew you
Charlie
were gonna say
Bornoff
that.
as well. And I think that Oregon has a good shot as well. They've got some good players. Obviously, you mentioned Keishel. I mean, I think
Dog.
that he's got to be favorite for Pac-12 Player of the Year right now.
He has to
I
be up
didn't.
there.
I honestly have slept sleeping on Arizona State and
Same.
Keishel, and I've looked at Keishel for years. I mean, he's been a good player, but dude, what he is doing right now, that's that's damn impressive. That is. I mean, I know there's Campos is in this conference, so and he's hitting above 400, but man, Luke Keishel is really good. But I'm gonna go Oregon.
He's a DAWG. He's a dog. Now,
Yeah,
this might be just name brand for sure the best matchup in the Pac-12 and one of the best matchups in our picks this weekend. But it's UCLA who's fallen out of the top 25 at Stanford, number 8 Stanford. I'm taking Stanford. This one should be an absolute blast. Though a lot of a nice blend on both sides of young talent and experienced veteran players that have MLB, aspirations. And speaking of guys with MLB aspirations, Tommy Troy of Stanford's my player to watch for Stanford. He's hitting 385 on the year with a shade under an 1100 OPS, 6 homers on the year, and a 411 BABIP. On the other side of the UCLA, Kyle Karros, he's been a stalwart on that team for years now. Probably the best bat on this team this year, in my opinion. I'd pick him for sure as like the MVP of UCLA, excuse me. And he's doing well is he's hitting 333, 923 OPS, 4 homers, and then a 367 BABIP. This should be a good series, a lot of fun, talented players on both sides of the ball. But ultimately, I think Stanford does get it done. Not only because I think they're the more talented team, but it certainly does not hurt that you're at home.
it doesn't hurt, and they're good at home. They've been a consistent competitor at home for a long time. But this thing about the Bruins, they're coming off back-to-back losses, and I think they're going to have something to say about that. They had a disappointing week. USC walked them off in Los Angeles, California, to finish off what was a great Pac-12 series. USC, how about that? Massive walk-off to take the series at home against UCLA. UCLA, I think, is going to regroup and make their way over to Stanford and make their way into a series victory. UCLA can really throw the ball
They
now.
can.
That they're effective on the hill, and I think that they're going to be able to slow down this Stanford team. Now, Stanford, in their own right, also has the ability to really shut you down in that way. At least the front end of Stanford's rotation is as good as any. But I think UCLA is going to take this series, and I think that they've been an impressive team. They got the series win at Oregon already this year, so you know they can go on the road and win big series in Pac-12 play. And I think that's what they're going to be able to do. Back-to-back road weekends, they know how to be road dogs, and they're going to win at Stanford this weekend. They're my pick.
I like it. It should be a fun one. And then the last match we have for the week for us, number 20 Duke at number 13 Virginia. I'm taking Virginia. I think they're still better than 13th in the nation. Like I said, we've said multiple times today, they're in their valley. I think they're going to start climbing out of it now with this series against Duke. And it starts with the best catcher in college baseball, in my opinion. That's Kyle Teal. What's he doing on in the year? He's hitting 417 as a catcher, which is insane, let alone the fact that he has a 1,153 OPS with 8 homers and a 444 BABIP and a 252 ISO. I mean, I think he is the catalyst to this team. Him and Jake Geloff are probably one of the best 1-2 combos in the country. Virginia's offense can go nuclear at any moment. Duke's pitching staff has kind of been shaky this year, and so I could definitely see the Cavaliers jumping all over that. And like you said before, well, they don't lose at home.
They don't. They really don't. And Virginia's been impressive. They've been one of the best teams in the country, but I'm riding Duke. They're the hot hand. They coming off those big walk-offs, and I think Virginia's slumping. It's a great recipe for Duke to take 2 or 3. So I'm going to rock with the old squad in Duke, who can throw the ball pretty effectively. They've been limiting runs. They limited
Yeah,
Louisville. I
it's
think
true.
Virginia's a much different offense, though. Virginia's
Yeah,
the
definitely more potent.
Oh yeah, Virginia's the best offense in the ACC. I think you can say that's
It'd
fair.
be
I
them or
think
Wake. It's them or
yeah,
Wake.
and I think it's fair to say Virginia's offense is better than Wake's. I think it's just also fair to say Wake is a better team because they have better pitching. But
Yeah.
let's not get into that. We'll get into that on another show. But Charlie, dang it, I'm picking Duke. I am.
So let's see. We only agree on the Vanderbilt pick then.
Yes.
We'll see, man. Well, this could be huge for you or catastrophic for you in the ranking or the running for picks.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll find out. Only time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. So that wraps up the show. Thanks for everyone for listening. Winners, losers, weekend rotation series picks. If you've got any thoughts, drop them below. And we'll hang out with you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening. That was the midweek podcast.